I hope you enjoyed that little bit of an Elvis rendition by the Piano Guys, taking us through the break. Once again, I am Gary Hendershot. You're listening to the United We Strike Marathon on April 13th, 2013, and our next presenters are going to have a lively discussion of Agenda 21. I'd like you please to welcome Michael Shaw and Charles Winkler. I'm going to be bringing them live now.
Well, welcome to the Freedom Advocates' contribution to this month's United We Strike Marathon. Today, we're going to get deep, at least as deep as we can get into within 30 minutes, into the background and nature of the ICLEI organization. Now, ICLEI is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. It has contracts with 600 cities across the nation in order to advance the globalist agenda. Now, 2 months ago on this same show, I interviewed Stacy Lynn of Colorado. Now, Stacy detailed the government attack upon her family. It's been ongoing now for 2 years. After her exposure throughout the Colorado Plains of the 35 contracts that Colorado cities on the Plains have with this ICLEI organization, including Denver. Today, we're going to further your understanding of this invasion, and we're going to demonstrate how ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, a UN-accredited NGO with contracts with 600 of American communities, and who is the author of the Local Agenda 21 Planning Guide, how it is that they have captured your city's allegiance. Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution prohibits all states, including their subdivisions, like cities, from having treaties, alliances, or confederations with foreign powers. It is my assertion that each of these 600 communities has engaged in treason, and the leaders of those communities need to be made aware of that so that they can change their tune or get out of Dodge, because 150 cities across America have supposedly canceled their contracts with ICLEI here over the last year or two. And many of those cancellations are subterfuges as those cities continue to advance the ICLEI policy. But increasingly, Americans are aware of this organization, and our hope today is it will become much more deeply aware at an even deeper level as I interview Mr. Charles Winkler. Mr. Winkler is a retired employee of the United States Defense Department, where he did national defense work for more than 30 years. He specialized in Soviet, Russian, East European, and Middle Eastern matters and threat analysis. He's worked for the Department of Army, the Library of Congress, the State Department, and other agencies during his career, both in the United States and abroad. He has traveled, studied, and worked in the Balkans and in the former Soviet Union, and is professionally fluent in Russian, Serbo-Croatian, Bulgarian, and Macedonian. Now, in retirement, he applies his national security analyst perspective and research skills to matters of domestic concern. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Winkler, who's going to give us some good insights on the ICLEI organization. Charles, welcome to the United We Strike Marathon program.
Well, good afternoon from the East Coast, Michael. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Gary, for having me on your show. Maybe I can give you your listeners a quick idea of my concerns, then we can discuss them in turn or as you would like to go through them. Going down the list, first of all, my concern is that ICLEI is a foreign organization, although they tend to say that they're not to their U.S. members. I have concerns about the personnel that ICLEI selects to represent it in our communities. I have some concerns about sensitive facilities being on the territory of ICLEI members here in the United States. I'm concerned about the information that ICLEI collects, and I'm concerned about who has access to that information, where it ends up. And then I guess the final point, what's going to be the bottom line, is what can concerned citizens do about what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, those are some pretty serious considerations that you list off. Can you give us a little more meat or examples on a couple of those so that people can get that deep sense for how this organization operates?
Sure. Well, briefly, the concern about it being a foreign organization is that its headquarters is in Bonn, Germany. ICLEI's World Secretariat is in Bonn, Germany. So it is a foreign organization. It has offices in the U.S. and elsewhere around the world. But despite what ICLEI says about it not being a foreign entity, its headquarters is overseas, and it's staffed by foreign personnel. If you look at their staffing there in Bonn, Germany. Also, I think when they changed their name to ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability in 2003, that conceals that foreign aspect of it. So that's just to kind of establish a baseline. It is a foreign entity. As I started looking in, go ahead.
That's very key. It strikes me. Have you or others that you're aware of in this alerting movement considered the implications of a foreign organization implementing local policy in spite of the constitutional prohibition, which I mentioned at the outset of the show? I mean, to me, the Constitution is very clear. Local governments simply can't do that.
Well, I would agree that we should not allow a foreign organization to be making decisions about local policy and to be promoting basically an internationalist agenda in the form of Agenda 21. If I could move on to some specific concerns that kind of grow out of that foreign nature, as I looked into our own Albemarle County, Virginia membership in ICLEI, I found that the ICLEI's representative to our area, and we have sensitive government facilities in our region, but the representative for the Mid-Atlantic up to the Northeast was a woman named Megan Wu, who was thanked by the county for her contribution to the greenhouse gas inventory that the county did. And I started looking into who some of these people were, and I found out that Megan Wu, whose real name is Jia Wu, was a citizen of the People's Republic of China and had been an official of the People's Republic of China dealing with foreigners in bi- and multilateral negotiations. And the concern there is that in a country like the Communist People's Republic of China, someone who deals with foreigners that's considered a sensitive position, and a Soviet military intelligence officer has stated that anyone who dealt with foreigners officially in the People's Republic of China has either works closely with or is affiliated with the Chinese counterintelligence services. So we have someone like this as a representative for not just our area, but all of really the Northeast, up Virginia up to Maine, which includes Washington, Maryland, Virginia. There are all kinds of sensitive government facilities in that area. So we have a representative from the People's Republic of China working for ICLEI, coming to this entire area.
And then what ICLEI would do was have a contract with many cities in the Northeast, and those cities then would begin the specific focus of late for ICLEI has been these climate models and altering, reducing your gases so that you end up with programs like One Bay Area, which takes the entire San Francisco Bay Area and makes it a city-state. Now, that's being driven by the Bay Area cities, almost all of which are ICLEI members. And as a result of their climate change analysis, the entire Bay Area is being transformed into a single economic and political unit run by a traditionally defined Soviet, that is an unelected board of powerful agents who are already mandating everything that your local city must do. Now, ICLEI works closely with these organizations also. They have truly infiltrated the entire local structure of government, and strange things are happening as a result of the combination of effects that are taking place in our local communities. And so that's why it's important for listeners to know if their city is a member of ICLEI, or to find out which is the closest city that has direct ICLEI involvement. ICLEI is managing local governments throughout this country by way of the operation of the COG organization, the Council of Governments. And so people need to, at the grassroots level, know that there is a way they can make a difference, and that is to grab onto that ICLEI organization, point out to the citizens in your community the nature of your city's involvement with ICLEI, and get ICLEI thrown out of your city, your county, and your state. That's when we'll begin to return to some notions of legitimate government in this country. Today, we are being pushed from the inside by forces that are well beyond the imagination even of most American citizens. But we've got to get real, we've got to see what's happening, and we've got to take local action to prevent its spread to where it really counts, and that is your neighborhood. Well, go ahead, Charles.
Well, I'm hoping, Michael, that some of what I'm going to talk about can be used by concerned citizens to raise these issues of concern to their local elected officials. When you mentioned the greenhouse gas effort, that was the first thing that caught my eye, because the kind of information that ICLEI collects as part of assessing greenhouse gas emissions includes railroad, air, maritime ports, highway operations. It includes information on number of ships handled by a port, the amount of fuel loaded at airports, tons of goods shipped by type of goods, say by rail. It includes information on the electric grid and natural gas utilities. All these things have the potential to be sensitive information. Any country that's going to go to war, I mean, whether it's us or some other country, would be interested in that kind of information, and it's the sort of information that you would match up with other sources of information. There's an Army field manual from the 1950s, FM 55-6, and it lays out the importance of exactly this kind of information for wartime. It would be transportation intelligence. That's what it comes down to. Kind of moving beyond that is the question of who has access to this information, since ICLEI is a foreign entity. When communities submit it, I have not gotten a definite answer, but if they submit it as part of their work with ICLEI, well, ICLEI has all kinds of foreigners. Now, not that there's anything inherently wrong with foreigners, but the Bonn headquarters of ICLEI is staffed largely by foreigners from around the world. So where does this information end up? That was another concern. What kind of information is ICLEI collecting? Is there basically an intelligence potential for it?
Well, and let me just throw a little deeper shadow on that very important point. ICLEI is the author, back in the 90s, of the local Agenda 21 planning guide. So when they claim not to be an internationalist organization, when they're based in Bonn, Germany, with offices all around the world, and they wrote the local implementation of the UN's Agenda 21 manifesto, I'd have to say that it becomes pretty clear that these are mainline internationalist players, and the information you're conveying here is information that's new to most people. Other than my knowledge of you, I wasn't aware of this. So this is a tremendously insightful and effective way of taking a good, hard, cold look at who this internationalist NGO called ICLEI is and what it is they're doing in the United States. And when we put it in the context of what's happening, we can really begin to pinpoint them as a major driving effort in the globalization of this country.
Well, I think I would have to agree with you, Michael, about the international nature of ICLEI. They will try to tell U.S. members that they're not an international entity, that they're not controlled by the UN in any way. But if you research, as you and I have both done, it becomes very clear that there's a very, very close tie between the United Nations and ICLEI in implementing Agenda 21. That's absolutely clear. I think ICLEI tries to conceal that, especially as concern about the nature of ICLEI and its relationship with the UN has been growing. There was something
along with understanding of Agenda 21. So it's a natural, it's a collision course or merger course as we identify, the two heads, or multiple heads to this, this monster taking America down.
Well, there's some additional research that I did. And again, kind of from my background, this was something I felt no one else was looking at ICLEI with the kind of background that I have. It's just probably, there may be people out there, but I just 30 years as a Defense Department analyst, and I dealt with both intelligence and counterintelligence matters. So I look at some of these things a little bit differently from a person who doesn't have that background. What I found is I looked at. Well, I became curious about what kind of facilities were on the territory of ICLEI members, and as you mentioned, there have been about 600. Thankfully, that number is decreasing as people realize some of the problems here. But I looked at how many major purely Defense Department facilities were actually on the territory of ICLEI members, and there were just in that Mid-Atlantic to Northeast, there were 103 major Defense Department facilities, bases, logistics support. They had to be worth more than $10 million to make that major cut. So right on ICLEI territory, the territory of ICLEI members, 103 major Department of Defense facilities. Within an additional 50-mile radius, there were another 117. So say 220 Department of Defense facilities, major ones, that are actually on ICLEI territory, or say within reasonable range. So while I'm not saying that someone from ICLEI can just go on to an Army base or into a naval port or naval base, but I think there's a potential to have access to information, and there actually is some collaboration between the Department of Defense and ICLEI. I have not researched that. Listeners might want to look into that further. But what concerned me is that say a citizen of the People's Republic of China, who was an official, was the ICLEI representative to these areas. So what kind of access is there? What kind of information is generally available even beyond the greenhouse gas emissions? I think that's information that can be used to raise some questions about membership in ICLEI.
Wow. And do you find that other people with a background in government are beginning to reflect on these kinds of facts?
Well,
go ahead. And further, would that lead to some breakups of the monolith out in major media on subjects such as this?
Well, the way I see it is that if they're concerned citizens, especially if they have a military background, if they've served in the military, I'd say anyone who's been in the intelligence community would certainly be aware of the implications of some of these questions I'm asking. I think that information could be used to raise concerns with their local elected officials. Wait a minute, what are we doing being a member of ICLEI? Here's some of the people they send to us. A citizen from the People's Republic of China, who was in a sensitive position, potentially some kind of counterintelligence association. That Megan Wu's successor had a strong background as a radical dissident, was arrested for disorderly conduct for occupying a federal building. These things all can, I think, be used, and I'm happy to provide that information to anyone who is concerned about this. If they, say, contacted you, I'd be glad to forward that information through you.
Well, during this next week, Charles, we will be posting a lot of the information from you.
Okay, great.
And linking it somehow to our ICLEI primer, which listeners should look at, the ICLEI primer. And while you're at it, you might look at the Miss Prisian primer.
Okay.
And take this for listeners who want to take this discussion to an even to another level. And but this information is key, and it's really crucial. I mean, we've had a lot of attacks being made upon ICLEI, but this adds a level of seriousness that can't be ignored by any person living on this continent.
Well, I should tell you that I still have my old boy network, and I ran, as I was doing this research and had enough that had concerned me, I laid it out before several people in different areas of the government, and all professional colleagues, and everyone shared my concerns about what I was seeing as I did my research into all this. So I can tell you that. I would say that if a community has military retirees, active duty military, somebody who would understand the implications of this information, and that it is important to raise awareness and a degree of concern about it, at least ask the questions, well, what exactly is ICLEI and what are they doing in our community, especially where there are, like, naval bases, Army bases, where there are sensitive government facilities. I think it's worth asking that kind of question about what exactly is ICLEI doing here. Also, if ICLEI is purely environmental organization, why do we need somebody from the People's Republic of China? Why do we need somebody who is a radical activist if there are a lot of qualified environmental engineers out there? Why does ICLEI choose people like this to represent itself to our communities? I think all these questions can be raised by concerned citizens to examine the role of ICLEI in their communities.
And I would suggest that if you're in a Western city without maybe these defense contract situations, it is enough that ICLEI is involved in this environmental movement, because the purpose of these set-asides in the name of the environment are merely to end up, I'm a believer that they are intended to end up as being given, if they haven't already, as collateral for the Chinese debt, the American debt to China. And so the environmental movement is all about creating these sort of land and resource set-asides to be controlled by environmental groups in coordination with the federal government. And I say that's a front. That's a front for taking the American resources out of our hands. And if that doesn't have defense implications, nothing in the world does.
Michael, Charles, I'm sorry to butt in here, but I did want to remind you, I can give you about another 5 minutes. I do want you to start thinking about a wrap-up, and please don't forget to do a little bit of blatant self-promotion and tell the folks out there how they might find more about what you're discussing.
Well, Michael, do you want to wrap things up?
Well, why don't you take some of this time, Charles, and give whatever message you want to deliver.
Well, there's another little thing that I didn't mention, and that's that there are programs to send U.S. Local officials to China. ICLEI links to this. It's called the China Climate Leadership Academy, and I believe that along the lines of what you're saying in a strategic sense, that there's great potential for the People's Republic of China identifying local officials that could be of use to them down the road, that they could subtly influence, that were perhaps favorable to the People's Republic of China's policies. There's a program that ICLEI is, links to with that. All 24 of 25 participants were all ICLEI members. This is kind of down in the weeds, but I think there's a broader picture, and I think ultimately part of this is shifting strategically. If you can siphon off assets from the United States toward China, say to fund environmental programs, taxpayer dollars are going to send these people there, then I think it has the potential to shift that strategic balance. And I think this is part of a bigger picture too, beyond just ICLEI and Agenda 21. That's something I can bring to us. I'd be happy to be contacted through Michael and your website.
Well, thank you, Charles. I want to say every communication I see or hear from you, I learn things, and I become more committed to the importance of the battle that an increasing number of Americans are recognizing. And I want to thank you for your tremendous contribution in this regard. And I want to say to the audience that fighting ICLEI and Agenda 21 at the local level is the only tactical way to restore America. And if you've got the Fat Cat ICLEI organization anywhere around you, anywhere in your state, you got a job to do, and this is a job that can bear fruit. The information is coming in. The connection with the Chinese matters, as discussed here today, is relevant, particularly for communities in the East. But this fight against the internationalist takeover of our local communities needs to be fought. Tomorrow morning, I'm on the radio broadcast Oh boy, it's on Reading Tea Party Radio from 8 to 10, where I'll be discussing the One Bay Area program, which is a typical ICLEI-directed takedown of a major metropolitan area. And what you'll hear tomorrow about the One Bay Area program being labeled by the leaders of the community, they would argue, as being the first international city-state reporting to an international order. A remarkable video, which is our #1 video at freedomadvocates.org, is Paul Sappho at Joint Venture Silicon Valley, calling the Bay Area a region to be reporting not to Sacramento, but to an international order. Now, ICLEI is very involved in the creation of the One Bay Area program, which is funded by $250 billion, designed to change the way Americans live. The ICLEI attack upon America, coordinated with our local public officials and our federal agents, is changing, perhaps forever, the nature of how humans live. This is something we can fight, we must fight.
I should tell your audience, excuse me, Michael, that we were successful in having Albemarle County here in Virginia withdraw from ICLEI. That's one of the success stories.
Well, that's a good one. Here in Santa Cruz County, they claim not to be a member of ICLEI. They surreptitiously are, but they are so afraid they can't make public this dynamic.
And Michael Shaw, that website, I do want you to mention that website prominently as we close out your segment.
Well, it's freedomadvocates.org, and during the course of this week, we'll be posting a package of information regarding Charles's work on the defense implications of the ICLEI organization. That's freedomadvocates.org.
All righty. And Charles, do you have a website you'd like to mention?
Listeners are welcome to contact me through Michael's freedomadvocates.org website.
I tell you, it's very important information you brought, and frankly, I'm a little embarrassed we were only able to give you a half an hour. I think we probably could have kept this conversation going for at least an hour, maybe longer.
There are lots of little details.
It's a very important topic, and I appreciate you fellows coming on and giving us your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.